When I think back to the summer my nephew Evan changed all of our lives, I can still remember how ordinary everything seemed at first. I was 36 years old, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. I worked as an elementary school art teacher, the kind who believed every child carried some form of creative magic, even if they didn't know it yet. Most evenings were spent grading papers, sketching new lesson ideas, or watering the stubborn plants on my balcony. Family dinners were the brightest moments of my week. Every Sunday night, my sister Linda would come over with her 2 kids, Evan, who was 11, and his younger sister Julie, who was 7. The house would fill with chatter, the smell of baked chicken, and the harmless chaos of family warmth. Evan was always the quiet one. While Julie talked endlessly about school friends and playground games, Evan stayed silent, usually sitting at the kitchen table with his notebook. He would draw shapes, lines, shadows, nothing flashy, mostly buildings, streets, stairways, and empty rooms. At first, I assumed it was simple doodling. Children draw all the time, it's nothing unusual. But I noticed something subtle. His drawings had perspective. The lines converged naturally. The shading made depth feel real. The windows reflected imaginary light sources. Most adults struggled with techniques like that unless they had trained for years. One evening I leaned closer to see what he was working on. It was a perfect sketch of our street, down to the mailbox angles, the curve of the sidewalks, and even the crack that snakes through the pavement near my driveway. "Did you use a photo?" I asked softly. Evan shook his head. "No," he whispered. "I just looked." That was the first moment I realized something special was happening. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention. Evan drew everywhere. During meals, while sitting on the couch, even when others were playing board games. He never boasted or showed his work. He just quietly filled page after page. One Sunday, after dinner, I asked if he'd like to see my art studio at school. I expected him to hesitate. Instead, his eyes lit up. "Really?" The next day, I brought Evan with me while I prepared lesson plans. The classroom walls were covered with student paintings, clay sculptures, and colorful murals. He stood frozen in the doorway. "It's beautiful here," he said. I handed him a blank sketchpad and my favorite pencils. "Draw anything you want." For the next 3 hours, he barely spoke. He drew a grand concert hall, huge arches, reflections on tiled floors, hanging curtains. When he finished, my breath caught. I could hardly believe it came from the same quiet child who barely spoke above a whisper at family dinners. That was when I knew. Evan wasn't just drawing for fun. He had talent. I approached Linda gently that week. "Has Evan ever taken any art classes?" I asked. Linda sighed. "We can't afford extras right now," she said. "But he loves drawing. Spends all his allowance on notebooks." That settled it for me. Every Thursday evening after school, Evan came to my apartment for art lessons. Not formal teaching, more like nurturing, focusing on perspective, anatomy basics, shading techniques, and storytelling through visual scenes. Evan absorbed knowledge like a sponge. He never complained, never asked to leave early, never lost focus. I watched his confidence grow, stroke by stroke. Months passed. Then something unexpected happened. My school announced a national youth art showcase. Students from across the country could submit original work for public exhibition, with scholarships and mentorship programs for winners. I knew immediately what it meant for Evan. "Would you like to enter?" I asked carefully. Evan hesitated. "What if I'm not good enough?" The fear in his voice was heartbreaking. "You already are," I said. We worked for weeks preparing his submission, one large, detailed education-themed cityscape that symbolized dreams growing through ordinary streets. The night before submission, Evan paced my apartment. "What if people laugh?" "They won't," I promised. "And even if they don't choose you, you'll still be brave for trying." He finally nodded. We uploaded the artwork. Then came the waiting. Weeks passed with no news. Life went on as usual, dinners, school, and quiet sketching. Until the call came. I was brushing my teeth when my phone rang. "This is the Youth Arts Showcase Committee." I barely breathed. "We are delighted to inform you that Evan Carter has won first place." I screamed so loud I frightened the neighbors. That evening, when I told Evan, he froze. "First place." "Yes." He burst into tears, not loud sobbing, but tiny trembling ones that revealed how long he had carried his worries alone. A month later, our family flew to Chicago for the exhibition ceremony. Evan stood before hundreds of guests as his artwork filled a massive digital screen behind him. Reporters asked questions. Other young artists admired his style. Professional mentors offered guidance and free classes. But none of that compared to what I saw in Evan's eyes that day. Confidence. He stood taller, spoke louder, smiled wider. The quiet boy who once hid behind a sketchbook became someone who proudly shared his gift with the world. At the event's end, Evan turned to me. "Aunt Rachel, I didn't even know people could live like this. Doing art for real. You showed me it's possible." I hugged him tightly. "You always had it in you," I whispered. Today, Evan is 16 and enrolled in a prestigious design academy. His walls are covered with sketches for future cities, sustainable neighborhoods, community hubs, hopeful skylines. Whenever he visits now, he sits at the same kitchen table but no longer hides his notebook. Instead, he shows us what comes next. And every time I look at his work, I remember the lesson he taught me. Sometimes all it takes to uncover talent is one person who notices and believes.